Domino Thinking presents Natural Born Speakers with your host, Allison Donaghy. If you were born to talk and want to know how to build your career around it, then Natural Born Speakers is the show for you. Now grab your seat because this is the place to be. Now here is your host, Allison.
Happy Thursday, everyone. This is Allison. Thank you so much for joining us. Really pleased here to announce that I have Vickie with us today. Vickie started a sales career in 1989, and she was selling Cutco knives in college. She then later became a stockbroker and a mortgage account executive. And she always said, if she can sell money to a bank, she can sell anything. She became fascinated with how words and stories transformed marketing into something simple and fun, and how using those techniques to help other entrepreneurs magnetize their prospects instantaneously. Using their own story to inspire and motivate others into action has shown her just how impactful storytelling is for entrepreneurs. She uses her unique flair for it to help businesses double and triple their clientele. Her personal story took a turn, though, when she became extremely ill with chronic Lyme disease. From then, she has spoken on talk shoe radio, about the topic and interviewed Lyme disease experts. She's written for Lyme lessons, and she offers a 6-part video series. Everything Vickie speaks about comes from her own personal journey and struggles. She's an advocate for natural wellness and uses her real-life mistakes to encourage others to turn their life and to go for their dreams. She recently wrote for the Huffington Post as well. So please welcome Vickie Gould. So nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to be here today.
Oh, and I'm so excited to have you. I just get so excited with guests and what their stories are and what they have to share. And you have such a great story. And we even grew up in the same neck of the woods back in Ontario. And that's kind of cool. Although neither of us are there anymore, are we?
No, I didn't really stay there too long, but I like to say that I'm Canadian sometimes.
Sometimes it works. Yes, we're not even going to get to the whole political thing, are we? That is a whole other talk show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would really love it if you could tell our listeners a little bit more about your experiences and what had led you to this point where you are in your life.
Wow. So, I guess I'll start with what you had talked about when I got Lyme disease. So when that happened to me, I really just kind of thought life was over. And I struggled a lot because, if you don't know much about Lyme disease, it's kind of like having MS and lupus and arthritis and Alzheimer's and ADD and dyslexia kind of all rolled into one. And it's greatly misunderstood and everything, but we don't have to get into that whole political thing either. But at the time, I actually thought that I had been going through this struggle because I was supposed to go out and save the world, eradicate chronic illness and, all that stuff. And,
right.
And I thought this was my path. So I became a master herbalist that time, and I engrossed myself in things to make myself better. And then, as time went on and I was helping people being a wellness coach, I realized that the story I was really telling people was that I wanted them not to live a life of regrets, because during the time that I was sick, I would lay in bed watching the world go by, watching my children grow up, not being able to do anything. But I regretted so much all the things that I had put off for myself, and I put myself last. I squelched myself. I didn't allow myself to be who I really wanted to be. Society tells you to be reasonable, realistic, about what you're doing. And your parents tell you something, and your friends tell you something, your school tells you something. You get married and you want to be this wife and mom that, you think you're supposed to be. And all along the way, I wasn't really being true to myself. So as I continued to tell my story to people, I realized that the underlying thing was not really about their health, but more so that I want people to realize that they all have greatness within them, that we weren't put on the earth to sit here and just do nothing, that we were supposed to go and go forth and be everything that we were supposed to be, and kind of take life, bull by the horns, right? And go do what that is that you have passionate about, what makes you light up. And that is the underlying thing that I realized. I kept telling people, yeah, you got to get over your health problems, but why are you doing that? So that you can live life. And it has the same thing with everybody else, whether you're going to work and, have this mundane roll out of bed, rinse and repeat, do it again kind of thing going on. I hope people don't have to go through what I had to go through to look back on life and say, oh goodness, I'm not being true to myself. Right. So that's really what I want people to take away from my story, is that we all have a purpose and meaning. And when you figure out what your purpose and what lights you up, that gives you that excitement to get out of bed and do those things and live life to the fullest. Mm-hmm.
And it is such a shame, because I think your story is common in so far as not because it's common because it is uniquely your story, but right. I think the thread in there is common because so many people, we coast, and then we need this, something that happens, something significant right. happens to us, and then we kind of realize we've right. just been going through this like cotton ball existence mm-hmm. where we haven't really been that alert or paying attention. And wow, and there are people like you willing to get out there and help people realize that before some sort of disaster happens in their life. Mm-hmm. It's really fortunate to bump into someone like you.
Yeah, sadly, it seems that the people who have had things happen to them in life, whether it's an illness, a death in the family, an accident, something big had to happen to make them open their eyes. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times people need that eye-opening experience before they wake up. Right. Which is unfortunate. Like I said, I wish we could all just, grow up and realize that, wow, we have something to give back. We have a reason to be here, and then just mm-hmm. go do it.
Right. Do you think it's necessary to have one of those traumatic moments or those aha moments, or that something, usually disastrous happen in order to get to that point? Or do you think that this is something that we could actually start creating without having to have that big moment?
I wish that I could say that moment doesn't have to come, but it seems like whether big or small, something happens with somebody that switches their mind. And mm-hmm. I say small loosely. It could just be that they continue to go to work, and then one day they sit there and all of a sudden they're bawling their eyes out. They don't understand why. They don't feel the meaning in their life. It doesn't have to be disastrous and huge, mm-hmm. but I think there always seems to be, when I talk to people, some tipping point that happened that right. made them come to that realization.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's something that I've often thought about, because I have, and especially with interviewing and that sort of thing, everybody has that kind of moment. And I think, wow, mm-hmm. there's something that we could do with our kids so that they could live with purpose and on point. Right. Is it possible? But I wonder if it's just part of the human condition that we need to have these experiences.
Yeah. I'd love for my children not to have to go through anything. Mm-hmm. We'd love to save them from everything possible.
Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah. My son's almost 27, and I'm still trying to go, no, just avoid that puddle. It's okay. You can walk around it. But they need to splash, I guess, and make a bit of a mess before they can figure it out. But mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you're working with people, tell me what you do. Like in your own words, explain what it is that you do. Like if somebody phones you up and says, hey.
Interestingly enough, because I told my story so much and I realized how impactful our stories are, I am now a story marketing coach. And I help people with sales and PR and money mindset and things like that. But for the most part, we start with their why story. Why do they want to do what they do? What lights them up? Why do they have these desires? Why? Everything's about that why. The why keeps you going. The why helps you, when you're having a hard time in your business or something like that. So I've now switched from being a wellness coach to a business and life coach, I guess.
Right. And then how do you how do you help people connect with their why? Because the more people I'm talking to, the more people who just are so unclear about what their purpose is. So what are some of the techniques that you employ with some of your clients?
Yeah, well, some of the techniques is just really a free flow exercise. I have them without any kind of censorship go through their life. Now, when you're telling somebody a story, you don't want it to be like a timeline, this happened, because that's super boring. And then people start wandering off and don't pay attention. Right. But, first of all, I have them go through and, from childhood even, to go through what were the dreams that they had when they were a child? What kind of things did they really enjoy doing? What did they say they were going to become when they were a child? A lot of those things remain the same, ironically. We don't really let those things go. And then I just have them free flow all the stories that stick out in their mind. And when they do that, then I ask them to go look back and see what kind of themes come up, because themes end up happening in your stories as you're telling them. Or sometimes they can even go and ask their friends, what sticks out about me? What are my characteristics? What are my, what kind of things do you come to me for? And those tend to have themes as well. And when you match all those themes together, it kind of lays out what lights them up, what their passion is, because their friends will tell you what they talk about all the time, what's on their mind all the time. Right. So that's how I get them to start looking at their stories. And there's lots of different stories that they can use throughout their business and their marketing and all that stuff. Stories that you're speaking on stage for, stories when you're doing an introduction in front of like a networking group, stories where you're just meeting somebody. Some of them are going to be shorter, some of them are going to be longer, some of them have a different purpose. But we always start with the why story, because that's kind of the basis and the foundation of why people are in business, and then that attaches to their story. Because in business, as I help entrepreneurs, we all kind of have a commodity that we're selling. The only thing that makes us unique is our story, our experience, our personality, and that creates that expertise and credibility. For the most part, if you're talking to a life coach or a business coach or something like that, nobody really asks too often what your certifications are. They want to know what your results are, what your background is, and what your story is.
Oh, yeah, because that's how we connect. Like we are storytellers, and I think it's part of our culture to connect with stories and understand stories, and I think we're always seeking them. And it would then make sense to bring it to whatever it is that you're doing. It's so much easier to listen to somebody when you can identify with what they're saying.
Exactly. And that creates that relatability, which is the connection, which I call the magnetism when you're talking to somebody who's a prospective client. The marketing in itself is just a conversation, whether it's online because you're reading something or face-to-face, it's just a conversation. The sales call to enroll somebody in a course or sell them a product is just a conversation.
Yeah.
So you always have to insert your story in there, or the conversation ends up being boring. It's kind of like when you talk to somebody, new or old, whatever, and you talk to them and eventually, the conversation dies and it starts being a little uncomfortable because of the silence and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And that's when your stories aren't connecting, when you're not relating to somebody, and when, so that prospect isn't going to be a good client for you because you don't connect.
Right. And even if you don't, often if I'm having those conversations with people, it's because there was never an exchange of stories. So there was nothing to build on after how's the weather.
Right.
Right, because it started so superficial, and you can only maintain superficial for so long, I think. And then when you start to talk to somebody and you get to know who they are, then all of a sudden the conversation becomes so much easier, because I think you need that story to build that connection.
Exactly.
Basically and what you're saying, yeah.
I tell a story about when I was interviewing for a realtor for my home. Now, realtors, I don't want to offend anybody, but they're mostly the same, right? They're like everybody has a commodity. The difference is the person. Well, they were both referrals from somebody, good referrals from somebody. I had two people come over, And the one, he came over and he was very logical, analytical, gave me a report, did research, that kind of thing. Didn't really chit chat a whole lot, just showed me a lot of expertise. Mm-hmm. And the next person who came in, same thing. She was a referral as well. Did not come in with a whole bunch of like reports and papers and stuff like that. But we talked about shoes, and I'm a shoe hoard. So we talked about shoes and family. I know. And so in the end, who did I pick? I picked the shoe hoard.
Yeah.
It's just the way it goes. It's the way people are. I connected with her and I felt like she could do the job. I didn't think, if I felt that she was technically unable to do it, I might have made a different decision. But I felt like they could both do the job, but she had a commonality with me. Mm-hmm. So I picked her. And so that's what I tell my clients, when you are either speaking on stage or you're talking to somebody one-on-one, whatever it is, there's a commonality there that you got to kind of hit, and then the connection follows with that.
Right. Yeah, and I think it holds true for so many things. Like, yes, a real estate agent or whatever the case may be. The only time I know my mom has a specialist, and he's not, he wasn't very personable. Mm-hmm. And I said, Mom, as long as he's really good at fixing your heart, that's all you need him for.
Right.
We can get you nurses that are really friendly, but if you're really, really, really that good at what you do, perhaps then you don't need much of a personality on the table. Mm-hmm. But unless you are like that expert and who you are doesn't matter in any of it, just what you can do, you need a story.
Yep.
It's just so true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in fact, one of my coaches tells a story that he was asked to be an auctioneer one day, and he's never done this before, selling paintings, and it was just kind of, it kind of got thrown on him that day. So he didn't know how to sell this painting, except he was a story guy. So he asked the painter, how this painting came about, what it meant, and all that stuff. And he got up there, explained it, kind of told the story. And I guess this painting from this artist, it was sold at the highest price that he'd ever sold any painting before. And the reason was because people wanted the painting because of the story behind it. And none of his other paintings had ever been sold for that much money. So, obviously people are willing to pay more when they find a connection.
Right. Yeah, for sure. It makes total sense. When we see the value in things differently when we connect.
Exactly.
So we have obviously speakers listening to this show. And how then do you suggest that people who are speaking about things bring in their story? And what are some of the potential pitfalls in doing so? Like, there are good ways of presenting stories and not so good ways of presenting stories. Yeah. If you could maybe differentiate that.
Yeah. So you're talking about people who speak on stage? Mm-hmm. Okay. So when I am speaking on stage, I usually go into the introduction with, what they're here for. And I usually, have a little intro, congratulate them for being here. But I actually always ask my audience if it would be okay, since we're going to spend some time together, for me to share my story with you. They always say yes. People are always interested. But when you ask the permission, it kind of like gives it a little bit more of a welcoming for them, rather than them feeling like, oh, they're pitching all their wonderful qualities or something.
Yes.
So anyways, then we get into the story, and I'll tell you about the 4 components of a magnetic story. And this potentially should clear up stuff for some of your listeners. And I had already mentioned that, a story is not a timeline, because a timeline is just really boring. And that you're telling a timeline when you say things like, well, when I was 5, and then the next paragraph is, and then when I was 20, and then when I was 30, and then when I was 40. And that becomes just really boring. It's like a list of facts is what happens. Right. So make sure you're using descriptive words, especially if you're on stage. body motions, gestures, inflections in your voice and stuff like that. That really matters a lot. Pausing. I always tell people that there's that Karate Kid movie. Have you seen the latest one with Jaden Smith? It's still old,
Yes.
but you know.
Yeah.
Okay. So the little girl, the cute little girl with the braids, she plays the violin. And her teacher says, play the pauses.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah.
So it's very important that when you're telling something or just speaking in general, that you're using pauses, using inflection, speeding up what you're saying, slowing down what you're saying for impact and stuff like that. So play the pauses because it lets people think and it gives impact. Okay, so let's go into the 4 components of a magnetic story. So the first one is the call. So this is when the hero, which is you, gets called into action. So something spurns you to do something. It could be an injustice. It could be something you struggled with, something like that. So figure out what your call is. This is where your audience will say, yeah, that was me too, even if it's not exactly the same. And a lot of times the call can actually happen during childhood. So that's why when we do that free-flowing exercise I was talking about, I have them start way back because you never know when this call happens. And you probably have had multiple calls in your life, but there might be a big one that sticks out. Okay, So number 2 is the pit. So this is where you enter that depths of darkness and you wonder if you're going to be able to crawl out of it. And this is where you want to convey emotions and be vulnerable and raw. Now, I know some people have issues with some of the things that they're sharing because it does get very personal at times, So just remember that you're in charge of how vulnerable you want to get, but the vulnerability is really the key in your story.
Right.
And, ironically, the more private you are with your thoughts, the private thoughts that you share, the more universal and connected it actually becomes. Because I have people tell me, just like you did earlier, that, yeah, people have gone through that. No, they haven't gone through Lyme disease exactly, but they've gone through something similar and they can relate and I can relate to them. So it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but they'll still see bits and pieces of where they relate to you. And they're going to remember that emotion. If you feel sadness in a story that somebody's telling, you'll remember a time that you were sad.
Yeah, it's like that expression, you don't remember what people say, you remember how they made you feel.
Exactly. And I say that a lot.
You want them to remember what you said because what you're saying is important too, but it's definitely that feeling sticks for so much longer than some of the words do. So that's
exactly
a super important point. Yeah.
And that'll also differentiate them from their competition. If their competition tells a timeline story, which is, boring and doesn't evoke emotion, they're not going to remember them. They're going to be like, well, yeah, they were technically okay and it would probably be all right, but I like you better. So, okay, the third thing is the search. So the search is where you go off and you're looking for answers. Like for me, because Lyme doesn't have a set protocol, I went off looking for answers and I didn't want to take pharmaceuticals, so I went the natural route. I did so many Google searches, talked to so many people, looked up so many books, and in the end, I became a master herbalist because of it. But that was part of the search for answers, for truth, for a breakthrough, for something. And while you're telling your story during the search, this is where you create that anticipation. This is where the audience kind of sits on the edge of their seats and they're magnetized, mesmerized. And this is where you kind of lose track of time. When you're watching a good movie and you're so sucked into it and you're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? I can't wait. It's like that. And then you lose all track of time. And that's where the search comes in. That's where you really suck them in.
Right.
And then the fourth part is the breakthrough moment. So this is where you kind of breathe that sigh of relief because you found the solution. The answer has arrived. You've come to the end of the tunnel. You're like, oh, finally made it, even though I never thought I was going to. And the breakthrough moment is where you establish your expertise and credibility. So when you figure it out, people are like, oh my gosh, and this is why at that time, people won't ask you what your credentials are, what your certifications are, what your degree was in college, if you show them your breakthrough moment well enough. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and like you were saying too, with the parallelism with things, the stories that we tell, there's nothing new out there. There's no problem that's new. There's no sin that's new. Nothing new is out there. So,
I know. I feel that when I go shopping. I'm thinking, oh, there's nothing new out here. I'm just so sick of shopping. And then you find this great little store that has great stuff in it. And you're like, oh, I've been saved.
Yeah.
Same
exactly.
thing.
And, you were saying that, I'm thinking, and they recycle our fashion, every 10, 20 years or something. I should have saved all that stuff from the 80s, man.
Oh, yeah. You'll save yourself a fortune in the future. But, and we digress. But it is like that, right? Everything has been done. And the only way to stand out is through your story.
Right. And your story that you're telling is going to match up with something that happened to somebody else because, again, nothing new. It matches up with some mental condition of society or of that person. So, So, like I said before, a lot of people say they relate to my story. And they'll be like, I went through the exact same thing. And they tell me what they went through. And I kind of go, that's not exactly the same, but I see where you're coming from with it,
Right. When I was in university, I had a psych instructor and he taught social psych. And he said that we can all know each other. And I had a real issue with this because our experiences are just so uniquely our own. And that I don't think I can know your experiences. I think sometimes things I don't even know my own experiences. Because we're always discovering and learning more things about ourselves, which impacts how we feel about things that have happened to us, right? So because we're always changing, our relationship to our experiences are always changing. And I think when you're able to tell your story, you can start to bridge some of that gap. I don't think I'll ever, having heard your story, I can understand now where you come from and where your expertise lies, but I'll never truly know what your experience was. And I think story helps people connect with those things, even though we can't really know what it is. Needless to say, I was not one of his more popular students. But I think that we are so unique, and we are made up of all of this great goo that's happened to us over the years.
Yeah. And, we really are all connected somehow, right? Maybe that's where he was coming from. We're all connected, so we all should know each other.
No.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay.
No.
I was kind of trying to give him the benefit of the doubt there.
And I would have been totally okay with that, right? Like, we are connected, and I think that's why stories help, because they help connect us even further. But I don't think we can know each other.
Right.
And he seemed very convinced that we could. But alas, he is still teaching the course, I believe, and I am still disagreeing with it. And it's not going to be solved on this show. But I think that is why the stories are so important, in my perspective, is it allows us to, for a minute, hold hands with that person that's talking.
Yeah. And it's interesting you're talking about holding hands, because when I talk to people about, if they were to coach with me, I don't talk about it as like, two people sitting on opposite sides of the table. I consider it as me and you holding hands, walking down the sidewalk together in the same direction, not face to face, cold, kind of like a me against you thing. It's together that we go through this journey of doing whatever it is that needs to get done.
Yeah, that face to face sometimes feels combative.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to bring up something that we had talked about before we got on this show, and that is about there's a sweet spot in your story, and There's a lot of humanness that we show with our vulnerability, which I'm all about vulnerability, being honest, being open, and stuff like that. But when you're on stage speaking and you are supposed to be the expert, because obviously you are, because you're on stage.
Right.
There is a sweet spot in telling people some of the technical expertise that you know, because they need to know that you have the technical part down, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to make sure you insert the knowledge part of the technical expertise that they're looking for. And not insert too much humanness, because there's a fine line and a balance. If you insert too much humanness, they're going to think you're not an expert anymore. Mm-hmm. And if you put in too much technical stuff, then they're going to think this is way too hard. It worked for her, but it's not going to work for me. I'm not going to be able to do this because it's too hard.
Right.
So there's a sweet spot there. And I know what you're going to ask me is, how do you know?
Yeah, so you just carry on.
And my answer to that is it takes practice. It takes practice, because speaking on stage, I guess, is a little bit different. Maybe you'd be a little bit more reserved with some of that stuff. But one-on-one, you can kind of feel out how much you want to get into that with that person, because you can see their reaction.
Right.
And I would suggest for people to see how those people, for the most part, go one-on-one to determine what you're going to do on stage. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because your experience on stage is you are having a one-on-one, but with the many.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a difference, do you think, when we are doing business with somebody in the stories that we tell and when we're on stage in the stories that we tell?
I don't think there should be.
No?
I don't think so. Because you say, the stage is pretty much like a one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And when I'm on stage, I kind of forget that there's that many people, you know?
Which is a trick in and of itself, which I'm sure some people would like for you to share how you do that.
Oh, boy, you're not going to like the answer to that one either.
Oh, I might. You never know. Try me.
Honestly, I think it's just my personality. You know, when I first started speaking, people would come up and ask me how long I'd been doing it. And I'm like, this is like my first speech, or this is my third speech, or something like that. And they're like, are you kidding me? And for the longest time, I'm like, I'm not really that good of a speaker. I enjoy it. I love doing it. It energizes me, and it's inspiring, and I just love it. It's like crack. It is like crack. But I don't know, honestly. Sometimes, people are like, well, maybe you should train people. And I say, I'm not sure, because I'm not exactly sure what I do that people thought that I had been speaking for all that time. I wasn't on debate club or anything like that, in school. My sister was a theater person, and I kind of did a little, but I didn't really enjoy theater. But I don't know. It could just be I like being the center of attention. So anybody out there who likes being the center of attention, you're just a natural.
It is really interesting in how we relate to that, isn't it? It's how do we see it? How do we prepare for that?
Yeah.
And you have such an easy nature about you.
You think?
This is not for sure. This is not the first time I've talked with you. And you have this very calm and easy approach that makes listening to you very, very easy.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's true. And I think, and then having never met you in person, I imagine your whole presence is congruent with that. And then when you're up on stage, that would come across. I imagine it would be quite easy to have you as a speaker. And because you're so relaxed, and I don't mean relaxed in a bad way, I mean just not, freaking out, I think it would feel like you were just speaking to each of us individually.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the trick with seeing the whole crowd as more like one person.
You know, the interesting thing about this, I don't know if we're kind of digressing here or not,
Oh, we can
but
digress. We can do whatever we want.
what's interesting is how much people can enjoy, because I know I'm not the only one, can enjoy speaking in front of a crowd, but not so much enjoy networking or being at a party at a big place where you don't know anybody.
Oh, I'm like that.
I do not like being someplace where I don't know a lot of people. I'll just hang out with that one person that I know and talk to them for 5 hours.
Yes.
And on the other hand, when I'm on stage, I make eye contact with as many people as I can, act like I'm talking directly to them. And it's a completely different environment. It's that whole extroverted introvert thing.
Yes. And more the speakers that I'm talking to a lot of them classify themselves as introverts, which before, like years ago, I never would have guessed that.
Yeah.
And it just seems to be it just seems to be overwhelming to me how many of them are introverts. I am one.
Yeah.
And I find, but then I was talking to somebody the other day, because I'm sort of cusping just into the introvert side. Part of it has to do with the quality of conversation for me. I could talk to a stranger until the cows came home about interesting topics.
Yes.
But I can't talk to people I know about the mundane for any length of time without getting completely exhausted. And when we're up on stage, we're talking about stuff that isn't mundane. We're talking about the stuff that's current and important.
Yeah.
And that changes our relationship. About it. Yeah.
I'm so totally with you. I just, when boring conversations, I'm like, okay, can we go home now? But
yeah, I actually just say that. Okay, I'm bored now. I've gotten to the point where I am not even going to pretend anymore. I am just like, this conversation's not working for me, so let's go talk to other people.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm like,
too short for bad conversation.
I agree. And I told my husband, the thing about speaking is nobody speaks back. It's just me.
Ideally. I went to a conference once with a woman that I know, and she kept yelling things out. And I kept like, shut up. And she would yell more out. And I'm like, shut up. Like, don't do that.
Wow.
So, yeah, I've never had it happen, but I really couldn't imagine it. That poor speaker. Mm-hmm. I don't know what you do with people like that in the audience. Get security to remove them, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't know. Mm-hmm. So, do you want to talk about maybe some of the other places that people could use their story?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so that just kind of popped in my head since we still got time here.
Yeah, we do. And then I want to hear all about the stuff that's going on with your life, because I know you have a lot of things going on right now. So you're not getting out of that. I want some shameless self-promotion here.
All right. Okay, so what I ended up using my story for, because like I told you, I kind of like to be the center of attention. I submitted my story to Huffington Post. I've used my story and some of my expertise and my angle on people finding their purpose in life, because, such a small percentage of people actually know that they're missing out on something or even looking for their purpose. And I used that in a press release and stuff like that. So I was able to get picked up all across the U.S., local ABCs and NBCs and stuff like that. And I can be a regular contributor to Huffington Post now, because I had submitted that first, the first one about story. Huffington Post actually has a section for blogs on life lessons.
Really?
So I encourage everybody to submit to Huffington Post their story under life lessons, because
great idea.
Yeah, it's an easy way to get your foot in the door. You don't have to think about, some technical expertise thing that you can write about that's been different. It's your life, it's your story, and it's going to be different. So it's an easy way to get your foot in the door there. And
brilliant tip.
Yeah, I'm going to submit to some other places as well. But, when you're in Facebook groups, always, always, always be sharing stories. Always be sharing stories. Mm-hmm. So, the intro story is usually somewhat of this background, but in a shorter version. And as I post in groups, I'll share more stories. And I try to share the story along with a tip or a parallelism kind of thing. Like one of the stories I recently shared was how I used to feed lightning bugs cooked rice. I don't know if you saw that one.
No, I did not. I'll have to go back.
Okay, so when I was younger, and the audience, I don't know if they see my picture or whatever on your thing, but I'm Asian, so we eat a lot of rice, okay? So well, I would catch these lightning bugs, and my dad back then, we had those metal lids, and he would pound the nails in the top of the jar, and I would go out and catch lightning bugs.
Right.
So they'd be crawling around in there, and, what fits in a round hole? A round piece of rice.
There you go. Perfect. At least
I give it to them cooked, okay?
So that was thoughtful.
Yeah. So I think I did also throw some blades of grass in there. But I threw blades of grass and, I would put the cooked rice in there and they'd crawl around and I'd wonder, why the heck aren't they eating the rice? And why are they dying after a while? They've got love and oxygen and food, what more could they want? Why are they dying?
Yes.
Well, back then we also didn't have Google, so that's my defense. I didn't have Google, so I didn't know what to feed the lightning bugs.
That is an excellent defense.
Yes, thank you. So I kind of paralleled that to, if you're feeding your client cooked rice when that's not what feeds them, they're all going to die off.
Right.
So when you can tell a kind of personal story and kind of, it's a little humorous that I would do this, but I actually did do it. And then create that parallelism, you get a lot more responses from people that way. It's a little more fun to have a conversation with somebody.
And it does keep their brain working. It keeps their brain engaged because they're not drifting off because they want to know what happened to the lightning bugs.
They died.
Yes.
And in one of the groups, it became this confession time about killing gerbils and other insects and bunny rabbits and pets. And I was like, no, we're murderers. We're murderers.
You know what I always found interesting when I would see people with bugs in a jar is that I would say, well, what are they going to eat? And they said, well, we put grass in there. And I'm thinking, but they don't eat grass. Like I'd never seen a bug eat grass before. And yet the things that we put in there, and we do assume that we just should know the answers for other people without any conversation about it.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Too funny. It's funny too because when you were talking about how we find out what our why is, and you talk about what you wanted to be when you were a kid, and that I wanted to be a cat burglar.
Did you seriously?
I did. I'm serious. No word of a lie. Swear to God. And I remember saying to my teacher, because everybody was like, I want to be a cop. I want to be a doctor. And I'm like, I want to be a cat burglar. And she just looked at me like dumbfounded. She had no idea how to respond to something like that. And then she was just like, no.
You know, did she?
Oh, yeah, she did.
Oh.
She's like, no, you don't want to do that. You have to pick something else. Maybe you should be, and I can't even remember what she told me I should be because I was still like, what do you mean I can't be a cat burglar? That would be like the best job ever.
Well, that ruined my segue into something else because I thought she was just gonna let you, go ahead.
No. This is like, I don't know, 40 years ago. Teachers weren't that progressive, I don't think, about letting us find our way. And it was far more about, no, you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher. That's it. Those are your only three choices.
Right.
Cat burglar was just certainly not one of them. But somebody said to me one time I should just name one of my companies Cat Burglar and then do something underneath it. And then I could still be Cat Burglar.
So funny. That'd be awesome. Then you could tell a story that goes with it. Wouldn't that be great?
There you go. Yes, that would be a good background story for the name of a business.
Yeah.
So, Vickie, please share with what's going on with you because I know you have a few things to offer here.
Well, gosh. Okay, so on my website, if people want to go there, it's www.vickiegould.com, and I spell my Vickie the way that I can't ever find a pen or a pad of paper that's already pre-printed because it's Vickie. Gould.com.
Perfect.
And on that front page, or I sure hope it's on the front page. Yes, it's on the front page. There's a 5-day challenge. If people want to learn how to get their story out and, how to retrieve it from themselves is what I'm saying. Not get it out to the world, but retrieve it out of themselves.
Right.
There's a 5-day challenge there. And there's a bunch of other stuff on the website. Another radio show that I'm going to be on, if there are people in Michigan, I'll be speaking at the International Women's Show. And, gosh, off the top of my head, I'm just trying to think of them all. Well, there is a possibility that I might be on a show on CBS, but I'm not going to say what it is yet because I don't have confirmation on that.
We will just have to stay tuned with your social media.
I am super excited about it, except last night I dreamt that I went to Los Angeles, where taping is at, but at the wrong time. And I went in to double check and see if they still wanted me, kind of thing. And the guy I needed to talk to was on vacation. And I got to talk to some other dude. And then I was completely rejected. And then I woke up, I'm like, no, that's not how the mojo is supposed to go with the universe. So I was not happy with that dream when I woke up. But, okay, so everybody else out there has to make sure they're sending me good energy.
Absolutely.
And
I know I will
me
be.
with, the universe and prayers and everything, that this actually comes into fruition in April.
Exciting.
And then we are doing a telesummit. I actually am co-hosting a telesummit that is supposed to happen mid-April. So a bunch of entrepreneurs who are going to be talking about their experiences, their expertise, and how you and your business can get into center stage, step into the spotlight, and start being noticed. So that's coming up. So that's my big project right now.
Exciting.
And I don't know what else.
I see here on your page, too, that you're going to be on Find Your Groove Radio.
Yes.
Which is also part of Bold Radio Station. That's with Lynn. Lynn's great. You'll love her.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm going to be on there in May. And if anybody wants to get their story out to the networks, I do have a done-for-you package where I do the press release, I write the release, I make sure it gets sent out, and it's guaranteed to be picked up by over 300 news and media outlets. So I have a package that I do for people, as part of it. It's funny because that whole thing kind of found me. I had a friend I was talking to about my coaching package, and he's like, well, what do you do? What's in the coaching package? So I'm going on about all these coaching things that I do, right? And then I say, well, and then I have this done for you part. And he's like, you do what? And I said, yeah, that's what I do. I write press releases. I ask you questions, get to know you, and I write the press release, and then it's guaranteed to be picked up. Only because I've done it before, because I've got the systems in place. Part of it is automated, So he's like, why are you not offering that outside of your course? And I said, I don't know. Am I supposed to?
That's great.
Like, you're insane. Yes, you are supposed to. So I kind of, pulled that piece out, and I've been offering that. And now it's funny because I lead with it now.
Isn't it crazy how something gets said that we just take for granted, that we know and we do all the time, and then somebody sees the value to it and goes, oh, yeah. And then you're like, oh, yeah, I am rocking something cool there.
Exactly, because, the things that we're good at is what your expertise is. And you don't realize it because it comes so easy. And that's exactly what I said to my friend. I'm like, but it's so easy. And he's like, are you kidding me? It's not easy for me.
Right.
I thought, okay. And it took me a couple days, but then I thought, you know what, you're right.
Yeah. And at that point, really, what do you have to lose, right? One person sees huge value in it.
Yep.
With that level of enthusiasm, then, and I think that's what a lot of us do, is that we have this really, really great skill set, or this really great idea, this really great concept, and then we just discount it as being so easy and therefore has no value. But like right now, I'm working on creating a color course, an online color course, because my other company is Sunshine Girls Painting. I paint houses. And over the years, I have developed a course to help people pick colors. And it is super simple, and it's excellent course. And I've just been doing it with my clients that sign on with us to do the work. And people are like, but it's so good. It's so easy. I understand color now. I know how to pick it. And I'm like, ew, now I guess that means I need to do something with it. But because for me, it's a no-brainer. These are your 3 steps. Follow them. You'll get a good color, and people do.
Yeah. And when things come easy to you, you think, well, why would people need that? Can't they do it themselves?
Yes.
And they
that's
actually
when you need to carry this journal around with you all the time. And if anybody says, oh, you make that look so easy, you got to write that down. You have to have an easy page or something. Just tag one of your pages as your easy page. And anything that you find easy that other people don't, then just toss it in there and then market it somehow. Yeah.
It really is the way things go. I always say to people that the things that find you end up being your expertise because people keep coming to you for it because it's easy to you and they know that you know how to do it and they know that you can help them and you don't even see it. It's like right in front of your face and you don't even see it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is so true. I was talking to somebody the other day and it was that same thing. And she thought she was supposed to be coaching this type of person. And then these other people just kept coming to her. And then she's like, okay, universe, I get it. These are my peeps. These are the ones I'm going to work with.
Yeah.
And changed everything. And she's never looked back. But it's that paying attention, that seeing the value in it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we have just a few minutes left. So is there any last minute little tips or tricks or anything else that you want to contribute here to how people can maybe, if you have any tips on how they can get booked as a speaker, how they can start connecting with people, or any little story thing that we haven't touched on?
How to get booked as a speaker. Sometimes you got to make your own opportunities. So if you're good at something, if you have a topic that you want to talk about, then create that opportunity. Ask people around the community if you can speak in front of their group. Yeah. And Google the heck out of whatever it is that you want. The International Women's Show that I'm going to be talking at, they come around every year. So people can Google the events that are in their area. And if you want to speak at something like TEDx, just know that TEDx usually books up 6 months in advance. So, and they usually want you to have attended a TEDx. So get on YouTube, watch a lot of TEDx's, and specifically the TEDx that you want to get into in whatever city you're close to. And then contact whoever it is that you want. But make sure it's 6 months in advance. You got to start talking to them because they start interviewing and booking their speakers. Yeah.
Right. That's great advice. I think sometimes it seems quite daunting for people, especially when TED is in the title and in any way, shape, or form, right? And it becomes that, oh man, that is so big. So how do you wrap your head around some of those bigger things that you've done?
I don't know. Gosh, that's another one of those, I just do it. I was talking to somebody earlier today about, sometimes you have that fear, right? What if it doesn't work out? What if I'm not good enough? What if this? And then you're paralyzed and you can't take action. Right. And I've just been one of these people throughout my life. I think it's just the way, I honestly think I got it from my mom. That even if I didn't want to do something, suck it up and do it anyway. Because you know it's good for you, you know it has to get done, and sitting there being miserable about it and thinking about it is worse than just getting it over with. So that's what I realized for me. So I kind of disassociate the feelings with the action, and then I just take action. Because that's another thing people are always saying to me, Vickie, how do you get so much done? How are you doing all this stuff? I'm like, I don't know. Not really sure. I just take action. I get an idea in my head and I take action. And I don't really think as much about the fears and whatever. And that's not to say that I've never sat around going, oh my gosh, am I going to make it? Oh my gosh, am I going to flop on my face? Oh my gosh, is Allison going to ask me a question that I don't know tonight?
Well, it
it's
did happen.
Yeah, I go through all those same things, but I guess the difference is I don't live there and I try not to let it rule what I do, because what I want in the end is more important to me than however I feel.
Right. Yes. The
Yeah.
feeling will pass. As long as you're moving in that direction that's taking you on that path that you want to be in. I think that, and the feelings can be quite debilitating, but if you can set them aside, acknowledge them, set them aside, and then stay focused on what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And this conversation, the two of us, before it started, I was like, all right, I'm going to be out there for the world today. And the thought goes out in your mind like, oh my gosh, how many people are going to listen? And what if I flub up? What if I, can't find the right words? What if I don't have a good response? And
it's downloadable, so it's forever.
Oh no, don't tell me that. It's too late now.
It's too late. You can't take any of it back.
Delete. But, beforehand, there's always that. I think everybody gets a little bit of stage fright, right? Before everything. You kind of do those things in your head, like, what if, or this or that. And I'm like, oh, come on. It's like a conversation and you have all sorts of things to say, Yeah. So it'll be fine.
And I think it is so important to remember that is such a normal feeling. I don't think I've interviewed people who have had them on the show, and they have had their own radio show for years, and they still sometimes feel that way.
Yeah, of course.
I don't think it passes. I think that's part of what makes it good. Is that little bit of fear, that little bit of uncertainty that just sort of helps ramp us up to rise to the occasion.
Yep. And I've heard speakers, friends tell me that they have turned their mistakes, something that they've said or something that they've done, they've completely turned it around when they were on stage, and nobody knew that was supposed to happen.
Yeah, because as a speaker, you're the only one that knows what you're supposed to be saying.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I can't remember the exact story, but a couple of them said, they made a mistake, or they didn't, I don't know, maybe their luggage got lost. I don't remember exactly what the story was, but they turned it around and used it as something like, oh, that was a test for you, audience. And did you catch that? And then used it as a learning experience when it was really a mistake on their part, but they were the only ones that knew.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And then it turns into a great story.
And you can use that story. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. And really, almost everything we go through can be turned into a good story.
Yeah.
And I love stories. We had a storyteller on a few weeks back, and I was just mesmerized by her. And because she has this gift for telling the stories and just keeping you there. She's an incredible lady, and how much I'm realizing the story. Like this last year, my relationship with the stories have just become so huge. I want to hear everyone's story. Do.
Yeah.
I love it.
And there's a fear that people have with telling their story. They think, what if I'm judged? What if people think that I was stupid? What if people don't relate? What if people, And
well, there's
honestly,
a pretty good chance, though. If somebody else thinks you're stupid in a story, you've already thought it yourself about that story. You're like, okay, you're telling it because it was a stupid thing for you to do, right? If there's no reason for somebody to think, because, God, I have some really stupid stories. I almost ended up in Lansing. No, where was I going? I almost ended up in Alabama last month instead of Michigan. And I didn't even know because I didn't even look at my ticket. Yeah, people are going to go, oh my God, she's a little stupid. I'm going to go, oh my God, yeah, I am. But that's just sort of what happens, right? We do what we can. And as long as we can just, I think, love ourselves through the experiences that comes out in our stories. You can't please everybody anyway.
That's right. And we're not trying to anyway, That brings up something that popped into my head too, that when you tell a story, don't be disappointed when somebody doesn't relate to you or somebody doesn't want to work with you or isn't like clamoring for you, because your story is supposed to do two things. It's supposed to magnetize the people who are supposed to work with you or get to know you, and it's supposed to repel the people that you aren't supposed to work with. So if there's people out there that are like,
you dodged a bullet.
Yeah, really. That would have been so
thank you, universe.
Yeah. Thank you, universe, because we've all had those nightmare people that were like, oh, please just let this time end. I don't want to work with them, Yeah. And that's what happens. So another bonus point, right? It magnetizes and it repels.
That's right. Yeah. Beautiful. That's a great, great tip to give. And that helps us overcome some of that fear, I think, or that sense of rejection, because it's not rejection. It's actually saving us.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure.
Well, Vickie, we have to wrap it up. It's been an absolute pleasure. Wow, that hour just went by so fast.
It sure did.
And I really look forward to staying in touch and hearing how you're doing and following all your great stuff.
Thank you. It was so fun being on.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I appreciate it. And thanks to Nesha, our producer. He is always so amazing on keeping us on track. Thank you so much. And until next Thursday, speak up, because you have something to say and we want to hear it.
Thanks for hanging out with Natural Born Speakers. But don't stop now. Contact Allison with questions to be a guest or hire her as a speaker. Go to dominothinking.com. See you same place and time next week.